My name is Ken, and today let's start the build of another boat, the Grand Banks Dory model from BlueJacket Ship Crafters. If you watched my YouTube channel before, I'm glad you've returned to see another boat assembly. But if you're new to the channel, welcome. I have a mid-level skill set, and my videos show what problems I encounter and how I solve them. My goal is to improve my woodworking skills again. Although this boat is advertised as a beginner kit, I found that no boat is easy to build. Easy just means that there's fewer pieces in there, and that's fine with me. It'll be a beautiful looking boat. I chose a boat from BlueJacket Ship Crafters because they're really high quality, so that'll help me with assembly. And I hope to reinforce what skills I've learned before in my other boats and assemble this one with as few errors as possible. All of my previous boats were built with minor and significant errors. But surprisingly, these errors really don't show at the end. One of the lessons I've learned is not to let the spirit of discouragement stop me from continuing on. My favorite cartoon character and philosopher is Popeye the Sailor Man. He said, "Alls I can do is alls I can do." So today, I'm going to try the best I can do and do better. And whatever happens, I'm expecting the journey of the boat building to be fun and the boat to be beautiful. Now, the Grand Banks Dory here was the first small boat produced in large quantities. This dory is a small open boat used for hand line fishing on the Grand Banks southeast of Newfoundland Island off of Canada. The banks extend about 350 miles east of there. These dories were designed to be stacked and nested in each other and carried on a larger sailing vessel out to the banks, where they were deployed with fishermen to go fishing during the day. The fishermen would jig on the bottom and catch their halibut and whatever else they were catching, and when their little boat got full, they would row back to the master fishing vessel and unload and go back out and fish some more. Quite hard work. So with that, a little background on there, let's take a look at this boat, open it up, and do a quick brief review of the contents, and then we'll get to assembling. All right, as shown before, here's the box. We open it up, and we got a little thing from Nick on BlueJacket information, the set of instructions, and a full-size set of drawings, 1-to-1. That should make it easier. And here are the parts. So here are the parts to the kit. This is the planks. This mahogany is the seat. I think these stripes are a barrel that get wrapped around here. The bottom of the boat, the mast, and some shear planks and cap rails, and some bits and pieces that go on the bottom, and they give a nice sail and line. I bought the paint kit that goes with it just to stay true to the kit. And I'm not sure what these are. I haven't come across them yet in the instructions. I did read everything. It looks like it's going to be a very nice boat. I guess my task then is to remove these pieces and sand down all that char and some of the char here and start with the assembly. So I'm looking forward to it. Let's get started. So I sanded off the char on the first set of pieces, and then I started to prepare the bottom of the boat per the specs here. It's a very nice drawing. You glue a piece of wood here, 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 and here, and a mast step there. That's what this is. And then I start building these frames over here. The boat design requires 5 frames attached to the bottom of the boat, for which you lay the planks on. And this is the process I use to make those frames. I've got 2 pieces of 2x6s here, and I lay a piece of plywood on top. I put my drawing, this is per the instructions, and put the piece of wood here and cut an end off. And as you can see here, I'm getting ready to cut the other end. Now, once both ends of this piece of wood here has been beveled properly, the next task would be to match this up such that the wood aligns with the diagram and makes a clean mate surface here, no gaps. And then they cut a little gap in this piece of wood here. And I find often that these are not 45-degree angles, or I don't cut them square, but this looks pretty good. I'll have to get a closer look at it off camera here. But I found that this little piece of wood, they all bounce around when you go to mark it up, and so I found clamping that, and that's why I got the 2x6s and a piece of plywood, is because this holds it down and it doesn't bounce. And then when I take my pencil and mark where I want the wood cut and where I want to put my little divot in here, I can get a good solid marking as opposed to having it bounce around and then it's a little bit cockeyed like that. So let me off camera take a look and make sure it's all right, and then I'll mark this and then I cut it up. And then I do the same over here with the next piece of wood, and I do the same with this piece of wood. And then once all those are assembled, I glue them together. Indeed, when I looked closely at that joint, I found that one end was 1/10 of a millimeter longer than the other, leaving a gap. And I found this little sanding device that helps me either square up the ends where I've cut, or in this case kind of takes off or adds a degree to the angle so that I get a nice tight joint. And this is how I use it. One of the advantages, you can swing this protractor around, and it's got a little bit of resistance in there. And I can see to it that I have just push it over the edge a little bit, and it's set up that I can just shave just a touch off the long end here that's causing me trouble. And with a couple of scrapes, I get a nice square angle, but I've modified it by just a touch. And with that tight joint, I can now use my pencil to mark these out, make my cuts, and when it lines back up, it looks good. So I've cut all the pieces. When you look carefully, they're all lined up pretty good. As recommended in the instructions, we should lay some wax paper down underneath the wood so that when we glue it and it dries, the glue doesn't stick to the drawing and damage it. So with the wax paper down, I lay a little glue with a toothpick on here and on this end and glue them together. And then I do the same over here, lay a little glue, make sure they're all lined up. And with these frame plates, I put a little bit of glue on top of all of that and lay a frame plate on top. And I let that set for a while with a little bit of weight on there, and then little, say 2 minutes, 5 minutes later, something like that, glue this on and put a little bit of weight on that. And then I let that set up for like an hour or a couple hours. And then I flip it over and put frame plates on the other side, and that completes the assembly. Now that I have these frames assembled, it's time to glue them on, as well as the stem and the mast step and the transom assembly. I started assembling these frames using my machinist square and my ruler also as another square to align these frames, and then as they were suspended across these 2x6s, I used a clamp to hold them down while the glue dried. But that started to become difficult as we put more and more frames across, and then I realized this alternate way. I tried a variety of techniques other than that clamp being suspended, and I eventually arrived at this technique where I would lay glue on the bottom of the frame and lay it down on the boat, and then I would use this machinist square to ensure that it was square up and down, and I used my ruler to see to it that it was square X and Y plane, as it were. And once I kind of arrived to where I liked it, I used another machinist square as a weight to hold down the frame instead of those clamps. After getting all the frames installed, the instructions say to turn the boat over and to glue the transom and the stem down. Turns out that the frames get a little shorter as they go up and towards the back because there's a bow to the bottom of the boat. And frankly, the first time I did that, I put some weights on the top of these boats, 3 pounds, and all my frames fell over and collapsed. Luckily, I think it was because the glue wasn't dry. I didn't take a picture, I was so discouraged. But I took it apart, resanded it, and got it back together, and here it is. And this time I'm using 1 pound weights. I found that any lighter weight just didn't hold it down. So they're glued and the glue is drying, but that's the next step. And then these little notches we now put this 1/8 by 1/8 piece of wood in there. And these are a little tight, which is okay. I got to figure out how to steam or soften this long piece of wood. Initially, when I cut these slots in the wood, I used the wrong size file, too small. Let me zoom in here a little bit. Here we go. So you see, that was nice, but it was the wrong size because this wood here is quite a bit thicker. So luckily I can make the hole larger, not smaller. And so I've had to re-sand these, which is no problem, but I did have to make sure I didn't bend these. Some of these didn't get glued good enough, so I'm going to re-glue them. And then when the wood is soft, you lay it in the slot. I start at the bow, work my way across. In order to bend and shape wood, most of the wood just fits in a pan and I pull it full of hot water, but this wood here is quite a bit longer. Wouldn't fit in any pans that I have. So I've got this pipe, I've sealed it up on one end, I drop the wood in. Sometimes you have to clamp it because it floats. Sometimes you have to clamp it because it floats. And I kind of clamp it down, then I fill it full of hot water. I do this in the tub because I spill a lot of it, or some of it anyway. And I let it set for 15 minutes, and then when I pull it out without burning my fingers, it's soft and compliant. It's really not that hard, but this is the technique I use. So I soaked the wood for about 15 minutes, and then laid it up against the bow here and clamped it, and then laid it in here and there and there and there all the way through, and then I went back and clamped it and readjusted. And I didn't cut the end here. I'm not quite sure how I'm going to terminate it. I think I'm going to terminate on this little piece of wood here. But for the moment, I got the bend in, and then I let it dry overnight. So when I take the clamps off, I'm kind of hoping it'll retain some of that shape. I sanded the frames so they would have a mating surface for the plank, and I installed the gripe. That's this thin piece of wood here, and I had to determine as to whether I was going to install the plank onto the stem or onto the gripe. I kind of did some looking around. I don't quite understand what all this is, but I like the look of installing it on the gripe itself. So having determined that, I then installed the plank. In order to get it to have a curvature, I sanded it, and then I wanted to align it to the stern here. And so in that process, a little bit of the plank sticks up. That's not a problem. So I'll sand that off, and I'll sand here once I take all this stuff off. And I used these little clips and glued them onto the planks and onto the bottom of the boat. And that's what I've done so far. I prepared the second set of planks, but as I go to install these, I can't figure out how I can get my clamps underneath here to hold it down. So I think now is the time to cut this boat from the board and continue on. I prepared them by thinning down the forepart here and the underneath part here, and then it lays in here so they go nice and neat. And I'll let the overhang in the back, and I'll straighten that out later. And both of these are prepared to go, so I'm going to cut them off now. Well, I made some good progress. Oh, this was not so easy as it seemed. This is some very thin wood, and it was kind of tricky to get it these bow part to line up here and to go against the wood. The first one wasn't too hard to put in, but to put the second one in such that these rear ends lined it up fairly close and the bow lined up fairly close, that was a little bit hard to do. And but it went on. That was pretty good. And it got a little bit of goobery glue up there, wood glue, but I scraped most of it off while it was wet, and I'll sand the rest on. And so I'm going to trim this end up. That looks pretty good. And I'm starting to look at the shear band here. I glued it on here to get these also to line up as well as in the stern. And I got some big thick globs of goo on these, and it just was down too low. I'm thinking I might want to press it up just a little bit. I might do that. We'll see. Yeah, but it just didn't look nice, and I think some of this wood is going to show. I'll probably shave off a little bit here, but nonetheless, if I could get this up a little bit. Well, it seems to be kind of short. We shall see. But anyway, but I didn't get a picture of the big gobs of glue on there. So I got a little, what do I use here? I use some acetone. Put a little acetone on there, softened up the glue, pulled this off, scraped it off, and I think I'll sandpaper that and see how that looks. Maybe I'll keep it down low or push it up. I don't know what I'm going to do with that. And get them aligned a little bit better, because the third band goes on and then you put the cap rail even with this. So these need to be aligned, and they need to be as high as I can get them. And the same back here. So I thought it'd be nice if the cap rail ended just below the curvature of the transom here. That's what it kind of shows in the picture. But if I put this like the instructions said and put this piece of wood up high, then the cap rail might be riding up a little higher, and I don't think I like that. So I dropped it down onto this part here. I don't know if that's the right answer or not, but that's what I did. And in the process of laying all these planks down here, messing with the bow and the stern and getting these on, I broke off a couple of these frames, and I think that's okay, because I think I got to cut the other ones down like this. It'd been nicer if it was a little bit more smooth, but I think it'll be okay. So that'll be okay. I'm going to lay the cap rail on top of that, and even if there is a little gap like there is here, I don't know if you can see it or not, it's going to be covered by the cap rail. As you can see, I installed the third plank, but there's a whole sequence of interrelated parts here that have to be considered when doing this. But first, the whale has to be flat in order for the cap rail to sit flat, and it was slanted. And this is due to the fact that you took this square piece of wood and you had to bend it, and it had to be up in the bow and up in the stern and down here in the beam. And it would be harder with this third plank sticking above it to level it before we trimmed it. So I sanded it first and got it flat, and then installed this third plank, and then I trimmed it down and sanded it as well to get it flat in preparation for the cap rail. The kit provides this basswood, and you're supposed to cut it into 3 pieces so that it makes the cap rail. But that seemed to me like kind of a harder proposition than just to cut the cap rails in one piece, and that's what I kind of outlined them. This wood's pretty soft, and this represents the outside edge, and I have to sand it and everything and get the right length. But I think I'm going to make my own cap rails of one long piece, and then that would fit right on there. But then there's the consideration that you have to put a shear band on the outside, and I'm thinking the cap rail, does it sit above the shear band, or do they mate, or does the shear band go above the cap rail? I have to take a look at that. But it's of a different kind of wood. And then it occurred to me that I'm going to be staining the outside and maybe the inside. And so before I go and install these things, I probably ought to get my color scheme straightened out. So I'm going to sand the boat down now and color the inside, or first I'm just going to put a gray primer on all of it, so then I can choose my colors. And I'm then going to choose a particular color for the outside and for the inside, figure out how I'm going to seal this shear band, and then with all that in mind, I will trim my cap rail to be the right size. And I might have to paint it first before I put it on, but I'll cut it up and get it the right size. And then maybe I got to color it as well if it's going to be a different color, and then put it on and then continue on. So like I say, there's a series of these interrelated. And then I got this little part here. I got to figure out where it fits. I think it goes in addition to the shear band, the cap rail, or underneath the cap rail. There's a variety of these little things that have to be figured out. So I put sealer on the hull of the boat and painted it a tan. Then I traced out from the boat what the cap rail should look like as a whole piece, and I cut it out and I sanded it and got it to pretty close, and I put a sealer on it, and now I'm going to figure out what color to paint it. I'm not quite sure yet, so I'll work on the other side next. So I painted the hull a tan, painted the shear band with an amber colored shellac, and painted the interior gray. And now I'm working on the cap rail. I've got them cut, and I'm working with the cap rail here. I've painted it a light blue, and I kind of like that, but potentially I'm going to do a darker blue or darker. I've been kind of putting little drops of this darker blue in here, and I think I'm going to choose a shade and now paint the cap rail and install it. I'm almost done with the hull. I've got the cap rail on, the shear plank, the paint job done. I've got a little bit of cleanup to do in the bow and the stern. I still got to trim off the end of this shear plank here, but I think I'm ready to start looking at the seats and the mast and the oars. There's still some left to do, but this is where I am so far. So I've made a little progress. I did cut the ends of these shear bands, and then I restained them with the shellac just where the fresh cuts were. I touched up a little bit of blue paint where some stuff was showing through, and I cut the seats, trimmed them. I put amber shellac on them as well, and I'm proceeding on. So I started looking at the deck equipment, deciding which would be the sequence to put this together. And I thought I'd continue to work on the hull and put these thole pins in here. Basically the oar locks. I never heard the word thole pin. That's an interesting word. But when you look at the instructions, these are supposed to be a 1/16 inch piece of wood. But they didn't give me 1/16 inch piece. The only ones I got were like quite a bit thicker. So I found I had one 2mm piece, which is about the same size. I'm switching over to millimeters. It's a little bit easier for me to work with. And with 2mm piece, and this is the only piece I got, kind of a short one, I also found that toothpicks are of the same size. And I thought, well, why use up this one piece of wood that I have left from another kit, and when I can use these toothpicks? Then I'd probably have to go out and buy one of these, probably Johnny on the spot when I need it for another boat. So I'll start working with these toothpicks. And I thought I'd run a little experiment. Now it turns out that I've learned that when you look at the boat, people often look at the deck equipment for the beauty of the boat. And it's quite interesting. That's the surface level part of it. And even though I spend a lot of time on the planking and on the hull and all that kind of stuff, and that's what you need to do to make the boat look good, what really pops out is the deck equipment. So I thought I'd run a little experiment to see if I can't make these tholes. And there's another interesting word, a snotter. I never heard of that. Check this out. It's kind of like a snotter cleat. So the snotter is some kind of line that holds this pole up, a gaff up. A snotter, that's pretty interesting. But anyway, so I got to make some cleats and so forth, and this is the stuff that shows. So take a look down here. So I drilled some holes and used my toothpick. This is not focusing. There we go. So I drilled some holes and used the toothpick and figured out how it's going to look, and I like that. A 2mm hole fits the 2mm toothpick, but it kind of had to pound it in a little bit. We'll see how that works on the boat. And I measured up here on the instructions, and this should stand about 5mm tall, and I kind of like that. Then the color, what am I going to do? I thought I would use this raw sienna acrylic paint, dilute it with a little bit of water, wipe it on and wipe it off. And so I ran a little experiment here. Here I just wiped it on and wiped it off, and it's kind of thin. Here I sandpapered the wood, wiped it on, let it sit, and wiped it off. And here I just put the raw sienna on and didn't wipe it off, and it's darker. But I like the sandpapered look with the raw sienna on, kind of thick, diluted with a little bit of water and wiped off. And then I pounded my toothpick in and rounded the thing off and painted it and then pounded it in. And I think I like that. But of course I don't want it sticking down so far. I don't want to damage my boat or have it come out on the outside of the hull. So now I'm kind of measuring how deep I want to go, and if I could use a little glue, or this actually is pretty tight. I may not even glue it. But this is the material I cut the cap rail with. So this is about the thickness I'd like to go, maybe just a little bit more. So I'll use my little 2mm drill and pound in a pair of holes. Get a set of these toothpicks all set up so there's consistency between them. Mark how far down I want it to go and pound them in. Thought I'd just share with you a dry run of putting these in. So I drilled pairs of holes throughout the whole boat, 6 pairs of holes. Put in a pair of the tholes to make sure they work good. They got to be a little taller than 5mm. I think 6 works. And I made all my tholes, and I can certainly make more, but I chose not to put them in at this time for fear that I bump them when I'm messing with the mast or the seats or something like that. I took the seats out while I was at it. And then I worked on my oars. So I got the dowel they provided and trimmed up one end, and I cut it to the length of the drawing. I cut little pieces of wood, glued them to the side here, and then I'm going to sand this flat and color it. So I've got those done. With the help of my wife and the instructions from Lauria, another model boat builder, whose link is in the description of this video, I decided to make my sails from silk span. I've done that once before and I really like the results, and so I'm going to work on the craft of making this. Silk span is a paper product, basically a thin tissue paper. Very thin. But this is how you make the sails look proportionally correct. If you take a look at the cloth provided in the kit and many other kits, it's just a little thicker than the silk span. And if you scale it up 1 inch equals 1 foot for this kit, it's a little bit thicker than the traditional sailcloth of the day. Another issue is maybe it doesn't quite fold the same as a real sailcloth. Anyway, it's supposed to look a little bit more realistic than a sail on a model than this thicker cloth does. So I thought I'd give it a try, get better at the craft of building with this silk span to see if in fact there is an advantage to it. Following Tom's advice, I took the sail here and provided it to my wife, who then traced it out on a piece of paper, not silk span. And this is going to be the template. We then cut a large piece of silk span and sprayed water on it from a water bottle and painted it with acrylic. And I'm sticking with titanium because that's what I bought, titanium white, but you can color any colors you want. And you use this foam roller here and you spread it out, and you can't have wrinkles, and there's all kinds of good advice on Tom's website. Take a look at that link in the description. And once it's painted white, one of the advantages is that it looks nice, and it goes up and it's to scale, but also it'll flake down, or at least it will collapse onto the mast. And I thought maybe on this boat I would take some pictures of the sail raised, and then I would stow the boat on my shelf with the mast and sail wrapped up and deployed, or laid down, not deployed, laid down on the boat. As I understand how this boat is used, the master boat sends out these little dories, and usually it's downwind where they go to catch their fish. So they deploy the mast and the sail and zoom over to the fishing grounds. Then they stow their mast and sail away, do their fishing, and then they row back. So I'm going to display my boat with the mast and sail all wrapped up beside him on the boat, not deployed. All right, I'm getting excited. I'm near done. My wife did a very nice job of making this sail. We mounted it to the spars. I have a little bit more work to do by tying these lines off to the cleat. When I mount the boat, coiling up the line on the seat. I painted the oars, made the line tub, got the boat all ready to go. I still have the stand to paint and get ready. But with that, I think I'm just about there. Well, I finally finished. And then I realized I hadn't tied off all the main halyard and the snotter line here, and so I did that. Now I'm finished. No, I didn't get the main sheet put on. And then there was a few little things I didn't get the stand made, so I made that, and now I think I am finished. I think it looks rather nice. Now I'm going to take the sail down, stow it away, and put it on my shelf with the sail furled. Let's see if I can furl that. I think it's going to be straightforward. Let's try it right now. Hopefully this just kind of comes up like that. And then you wrap the sail around, if I understood what they said. I don't know what I'm going to do with this line. Well, I don't know if you can tell, but I had my wife come up and wrap it a little tighter, and the mast now shows a little bit. And it sits in there a little lower so you can roll. So I think I like that. Well, I guess that finishes another model build. I enjoyed it. I hope you did too. If you do, like the video, leave comments. I read them all and answer most of them. I'm not sure about this paper, this silk span. I think it looks good. Better than cloth. Maybe the next boat I build, I'll go back to the kit provided cloth and see how it compares. I think my last two boats have used silk span, and I'm getting better at it. I don't know. Maybe it's good, maybe not. Leave those in the comments if you like. Well, with that, I'll probably put my building kit away for a little bit, and then I will bring it back out and start another model boat. And depending upon how complex it is, I'll release a video in 4 or 5 months. So until then, may the Lord keep you safe until He returns. Bye-bye.